Thank you all for joining. My name is Keelan. I'm going to be facilitating. Today's date is May 26, 2022, and we are doing the group AMA for becoming and being staff at GitLab. Essentially, what we'll do is, just standard AMA format. I'll have participants read their questions if they'd like. If you don't want to read your questions, I'm also happy to verbalize those. And then anyone who's not here, I'll go ahead and read their questions as well. I will have at this point, I'll have our lovely staff introduce themselves. Will, if you want to go ahead and start.
Thank you. It's always nice to be called lovely. Hi, I guess everyone here knows me. I've been staff for about 2 years, and my last day of staff is next Wednesday or Tuesday, I guess. So yeah, that's me.
I think we also had in there that you're supposed to say where you're located, Will.
Oh, yes. Was there? Oh, there it is. Yes. Okay. I'm in Columbus, Ohio, United States. And I guess Cynthia, you're next on the list.
My name is Cynthia Ng, but mostly known as Arty. I've been a staff support engineer since the beginning of February, so not very long. I'm located on the west coast of Canada, specifically on Vancouver Island. And last but not least.
Hi, everyone. I'm Drew Blessing, former staff support engineer. It's been a couple of years since I was in that role, but I think I was staff support engineer for 2 or 3 years. Don't know exactly, but appreciate the invitation to be here and hope I can remember a lot of the things that I did back in that role. Happy to share. Oh, and I'm located in Nebraska.
All right. Well, thank you folks so much. We'll go ahead and get started on questions. I'll be keeping an eye on time and stuff. So if we get too close, I'll move things along. But Gerardo, you're up first. You have a couple questions. If you want to go ahead and ask those.
So I'll verbalize both of them just because I think they're sort of related. My first question is, how does your staff activities differ from senior? And probably Cynthia is more recent in this, so she might have a better answer. And what is your focus as a staff? Like, how much do you focus on tickets? How much do you focus on other things? What is your aim for a month or next few weeks?
I guess I can go first. So things that are different from senior and intermediate. Let's see. I came as a senior, so I don't have any perspective there. But when I took the role, what Lee described it to me was leveraged work, right? So the goal is not to achieve something yourself necessarily; it's to make it so that the team can achieve something more easily, or not have to do it at all. So for me, that means that in terms of tickets, I try not to really take ownership of tickets. I think with the new groups thing, it's I don't think we're really supposed to at all, but I think that's up in the air, and I guess that'll be Cynthia's problem. So I try to help. So this morning I joined a customer call, and then I joined another call right after that to help some other people look into other tickets. So it's really, trying to help other people get ideas on how to move their tickets forward. And then if there's, an escalated customer where there's some kind of week-long slog of this terrible thing is happening, we need to figure it out, then I might become one of the people that owns that. Probably not the lead though. I still try to let someone else be the face for the most part. And then I also have some projects that, or really at this point only one project, fast stats, to try and help the team be more efficient, that I spend some time on. And that's really hit or miss. It just depends on some months I have no spare time to look at that. Other times I have a fair amount of time, but it's not consistent at all. I would say that my days change a lot. There's never I don't have a pattern of I spend 9 to 10 looking at tickets or 11 to 12 doing fast stats. That never happens for me, at least.
Drew, I would actually really be curious to know how it worked for you.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember, and I think to an extent, some of the processes and the way that the team operates today are different, but I remember if there was a ticket where our team as a whole didn't have a lot of expertise, like I'll say CI, I'm just picking something out. But at that time we weren't specializing in anything. So if nobody on the team knew right offhand, how do we test this? How do we figure out if this is a bug or what the behavior is? A lot of times I think that fell to a staff engineer then to just really dig in and try to reproduce it, try to figure it out, but then coordinating across the development groups as well, finding those experts in the development team that could fill in those gaps for us.
I'm going to say that my answer would be very similar to Will's, where it really depends on the day. I had a week recently that was taken up by a security incident that I had to help with because I needed to help dev look at which solution would be the best one based on my knowledge of the technical understanding of the feature, as well as the impact on customers, which customers we needed to potentially reach out to, looking at logs to pull the list of customers we might reach out to, all of that. So it probably took up like half the time for an entire week that I had. And so there left very little time for other things. So definitely, like Will, I do spend a lot of time helping others, be that lever of levers. I believe that comes from the book High Output Management, which is one of the books mentioned in our handbook. If someone wants to find the handbook link and add it to the doc. It's a really good read, especially if you're thinking about actually going into management. But I think it's really good for those thinking about staff too. It's that Lyle and Lee both talk about it as well mentioned. It's really about helping others be successful. And that might take many forms, whether it's helping on tickets, whether it's helping improve our training, our docs, handbook process, hiring, you name it.
All right, thank you. Did that answer both halves of your question? You had two questions on there. Did you ask them both at the same time?
Yeah, I did. I think that it was, I think we can merge both.
Okay. Then I'll read some of Ben's questions here. The first one of his is, when onboarding new SEs, I'm going to assume the role of Ben, I often provide advice about what to focus on during onboarding, things they may struggle to find time for later. Is there anything you would advise aspiring staff SEs to do before kicking off the process with the benefit of hindsight?
I guess I can go first and say, not particularly. No, unfortunately not. I was already kind of focused on Giddily before I became a staff, and then that was kind of remained the thing that I dealt with the most after becoming staff, although, I'm not like, that's not the thing I deal with, obviously. But, I guess in general, just having, I don't know, it does sound so trite, just understand how the pieces fit together. But I think anyone who's trying to go for staff is probably already at that point. So no, I don't have anything intelligent to add, but now that I've talked for 2 minutes, I'll let someone else be more useful.
I think it's changed a bit. Yeah, Drew, I don't know like how different it was for you.
Yeah, I don't know if I have anything to add there.
So I will say it has changed a little bit. I actually don't know if the requirement itself has changed. This answers a little bit of one of the questions below in the doc, actually, that our promotion process to staff requires that you not only meet the role based on merit, which is true for staff, or sorry, senior, But for staff, you also need to be meeting a company need. As I understand it, they're a little stricter about it these days than potentially they were in the past about exactly what that meant or how you kind of present that in a promotion document. So I would say that, and it's possible that for Drew and Will, it was just clear for them and for their managers. It wasn't super clear for me. And so I would definitely say that I would have liked to have had the conversation about what company need I was fulfilling or would fulfill as I moved, or as I worked towards staff earlier in the process. It took, it took me longer. It definitely took me longer to go through my promotion process because I had the conversation later than I should have. But if you ever want that conversation, I would definitely also say that you want to go to your senior manager or director, depending on which region you're in, to have that conversation. Sorry, Will, you were saying.
All right, there's the unmute button. I was just saying, I was just agreeing, as I said, that it didn't really come up for me for my promotion process. You know, I didn't have a staff at that point, so I was like, I guess maybe that was the need. But also, I think you're right that this wasn't something that really, it was never mentioned that I recall in my conversations with Lee. So I don't know.
Drew, is there anything you wanted to add on to that at all?
No, in terms of the promotion process, I think it's changed quite significantly. It's probably a bit less formal, but you know, there's good and bad to that. The formal process, when you have those requirements clearly laid out, at least ideally, there's you know exactly what you need to do to achieve that.
All right. So we have another one from Ben. What things do you miss about being a senior?
I feel like I could, you know, so I was doing my own tickets a lot more then. So that was, I guess days are more regular, you know, like I knew what tickets in general I was dealing with. I kind of had more of a routine because it was like, you know, I'm going to pick up tickets for, depending on what are, like, you know, what particular like scheduling system we're using, like that day of the week or that time of the day or whatever. But it wasn't pulled in as many directions. So that was nice, you know, to be able to, in some ways, you know, it's interesting because in some ways I'm able to set my schedule more as a staff, you know, because like I'm not dealing with specific tickets, but also I'm able to set it less because I don't know if, I think at the whim is not the right way of putting it, but I'm pulled in a lot of directions. And so it can be hard to really, I don't know, manage my time. Maybe that's something I'm just bad at, but that's something that I do miss a bit from being a senior.
Arty, what about you?
I'm going to agree with Will. I get pulled in a lot of directions. By not always having like a lot of tickets assigned to me, as Will said, in a way you can set your schedule more, but then because often things come up, security incidents, escalations, whatever it is, that overrides whatever you had planned anyways. I actually find that my schedule is actually less predictable now than it was before. That's probably the main thing. The one other thing I will say is that as I moved more towards doing staff work, I find it harder to actually measure my impact and results. So especially as an intermediate, you can just say, hey, I'm answering this many tickets. Even as a senior, that's a large part of it. You can kind of have very objective numbers on number of comments in tickets or number of tickets solved, whatever it is, number of MRs. And the higher up you go, I find the harder it is to measure your impact when you don't have those numbers to rely on. And a lot of what I would say that I do is helping others. How do you measure that objectively? Like if I can count the number of pairing sessions I do, but then I also answer a lot of questions in Slack, and none of that is recorded anywhere. So how do you measure your impact, right? And so, yeah, I would say that's one of the things I really struggle with, and one of the things that I'm gonna work on with my managers for us to kind of think about how we can best measure the impact of someone working at the staff level. Drew, I'm curious, actually, you started, I think, as you definitely were promoted to staff at some point. So I'm curious how different it was for you.
I think that I echo a lot of the things that both of you have said. It is a lot of getting it pulled in different directions, and it is hard to measure. I remember that, kind of going through part of a week and struggling to look back and say, what have I accomplished this week? And I think there's a lot of pressure also when you're dealing with customer issues that maybe have been ongoing for a while that we're struggling to find a solution for. As a staff engineer, in terms of the support side of things, I think that it kind of lies with you to find those solutions, and so that adds some pressure, as well as I think pressure to find and do some of the projects like Will was mentioning. I remember fast stats. Will was always creating scripts and things that were very helpful in working with customer issues. So, but that does add a little bit of pressure as well to create those projects and find that impact for the team.
All right. I'm actually going to jump one of the questions from the question pool up a little bit because I'm curious. I'd like an answer for it. It's number 3 for our note takers down there. What is the most important thing that you do that's different from your senior role?
I don't know. I don't think there's like a sea change in what I'm doing that's different from my senior role. Like as a senior, I was still helping people. I had already started all the projects that I deal with now. I just do more of them. So there's nothing unique for me, at least, about being staff versus senior. It's just, yeah, the same, but more.
I agree. And I think to a large extent, it's this way across GitLab with moving up into different roles. It's not a dramatic change. It's you're already building up to that before you get that promotion. So you have a lot of that experience, and it doesn't require a marked change at that moment when you become a staff engineer.
The only thing I'll add is that I definitely agree in terms of how we work individually. There's not going to be much of a change. Anyone who's gone through their promotion to senior will know that going from intermediate to senior, you're being promoted to senior because you're already doing that work. And in a lot of ways, that's true for staff as well. But in terms of what a staff does that I think is particularly kind of more, it's more than what a senior would do. I don't know if it's the most important thing, is looking at kind of the higher level and being more strategic about it. So if you watched actually the discussion that I had with Lyle last year that we recorded, one of the things we talked about was that as an intermediate, often you're just focused on your own work. So like your tickets and getting tickets done. As a senior, you're more focused on the team as a whole, how to help the team, how to help others in the team. As a staff, you go beyond that. You start looking at not just a team, but also how to leverage what we do in support to help the whole company. And, you know, even though some of the tooling that Will and others have built is for supports use, in a lot of ways, we also send those over to customers for customers to use and help analyze things, right? That's not always true for all the tools we build, but certainly some of them. And it makes us more efficient, which means we're spending less time per ticket. Again, it increased all of support's efficiency, which has an impact on our budgeting and all this other stuff. So it's helping the company at a higher level. Some of the other work that we do, again, we mentioned escalated customers. You know, we're often working across multiple teams with customer success, dev, and support, possibly others. And you know, I often end up working with security or infra on some of the other issues that I specifically work on. So I think that is kind of what distinguishes often the level of work that staff does. And again, we also think more about the strategic direction that support is taking as a whole. And we might not do that, like think about that specifically for every piece of work that we do, but we'll work with our managers to look at how we prioritize things based on the direction for support as a whole, and within how we fit the company. Does that make sense, hopefully?
I follow. Do any of you have any other last comments on that one? No? Okay, cool. Then the next question I think has probably been touched on a little bit, but the promotion doc for senior SE was about presenting evidence that you were a senior already in everything but name. Is the promotion to staff the same, similar, or different in any particular ways?
My recollection is yes. It's been a while though. Cynthia probably has stronger feelings on this.
I already mentioned that in my view, the main thing is that you have to have that discussion about company need and what you're fulfilling around that. Aside from that, I think what you put in the doc exactly is obviously going to be different, but the process I think is pretty much the same.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that's true across most promotions in GitLab is for the most part, you're already doing that role by the time you are promoted.
All right. So logically, an SE could choose to remain a senior and just do the bits of staff that they want to do. Those bits of the role don't require the title because everyone can contribute. Ben just says, discuss.
I think that's definitely true. And I think that's one of the nice things about GitLab as a whole is that you're not really pigeonholed, and that if you see a need, you can just do it for the most part, assuming that it's not like getting in the way of your job in general. So yeah, that's one of the things about GitLab, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I think it just depends on each person's desires and personal goals. And in many ways, sometimes it is easier to kind of pick those pieces of a role that you really enjoy and just do those things. And it's definitely beneficial for the company and for the team, regardless of what title you have. So definitely an individual thing.
The only thing I'll add is that that's true of any role. I know some intermediates that could become senior if they wanted to, but they don't want to change the focus that they have in their work. And that's okay. And that's true for seniors too. If they want to stay a senior so that they can focus on what we think of as a focus for a senior in their work. I actually considered that at some point, partially because we were somewhat struggling as a whole, like between myself as well as the managers, to really look at and consider what company need I was going to fulfill and what company needs we have within support. So I actually straight up said, well, if we can't find something for me to focus on, then I would just stay senior. Like that's not a problem, right? I mean, it's again, it's just something that you're allowed to do and you're free to do, and it's there isn't a push to always be moving up.
All right. I don't think Łukasz is here, so I'll read that question as well. Since, as mentioned above, promotion to staff requires fulfilling a company need, I assume the path to promotion and the promo document itself should both show the way you fill it. How did you find and describe that need? And if you feel at any point that we've already covered these, you can always reference back to the other questions. I don't want to keep answering the same questions, but if you have different insight on these, please feel free.
I'll just reiterate that this didn't really come up for me.
Arty, it sounds like you might be the only one who had this at all.
Drew, you were going to say?
Yeah, just to echo, same for me. That was not part of the conversation at the time.
My guess is for both Drew and Will that it was there. It was just described as part of the manager summary, which we have at the top of every promo doc. And that's actually true for myself as well. I'd have to look it up to be sure, but I don't remember the doc, specifically say, this is the company need that Cynthia is fulfilling, right? Like I don't think it says that. I think it's kind of integrated into the promo doc itself. Certainly because I had that discussion with both my manager and my senior manager, the examples that I pulled out to put in the promo doc, like from my body of work, did more focus more on what we talked about being the company need, but I can't say that it was specifically called out.
All right. I'm going to stop impersonating Ben since he showed up, and I'm going to have him ask his final question here.
Thanks. So I see staff engineers are outside of the support global groups. How's that working?
Yeah, so I've started transitioning right when we started going to global groups, so I haven't really paid too much attention to that or really gotten too involved with it. So yeah, I don't know. So I guess the short answer is I'm not sure.
I'm going to say I don't think we've had enough time with it to actually comment.
And I have no experience whatsoever with support global groups, so no comment.
Hot keys are back. That's what's happening.
All right. Sam, your question number 9, would you like to vocalize?
Sure. Looking from the outside, seems like there's a pipeline from staff to developer. I just want to know if this is the natural transition and what's thoughts about it, right?
I don't think it's necessarily a natural one. So I think we've had roughly equal numbers of people from support go into SRE and into development off the top of my head, because we had Cindy and Rahab certainly went into SRE. Drew, Keelan, Jason, and myself are in development. But yeah, so I certainly like, I think those are kind of like the two places that people from support have gone within GitLab. I don't think that development is necessarily more of a place for staff versus SRE. I think they're both great places to be. But yeah, one of those two seems like the logical place for the skill set that we have in support. But there are lots of other places in GitLab too. So if you have other skills, then there's probably good places to go as well.
Yep, I agree. Mostly depends on your own interests. I'd say anything's open.
Oh, Ben mentions, yeah. So we also had Amanda and Donique, right? They went into product management. So yeah, so actually lots of places. Yes, I was right, even though I didn't know what I was talking about.
There's can also think of one TAM and a developer advocate. Is it the job title? So yeah, support
I
engineers
think
all
the
over the place.
title, yeah, I think the title is developer evangelist, but yes, so we
yeah.
had someone go to the community team, and then we also did have at least two go to become TAMs.
Oh, right. There's Chinjay, and who was the other one?
Colin.
Oh, right. Colin. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, we also had someone go to professional services. Tiago.
All right. Tiago. Yeah. Okay.
Drew, I'm going to ask you to actually expand on your answer a little bit. I'm kind of curious how you kind of made that decision to go from support to dev.
For me, I think it was that I've always had a development interest. I'd say even before coming into my role at GitLab, when I first joined GitLab. And so just wanting to do something different. No real specific reason, just my personal interests and change of pace.
Well, I'm going to ask you to answer that too.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I think for me, SRE would have been another place to go. I like performance issues, and you can kind of get it from either side. So like in SRE, there's like Matt Smiley and Igor Wiedler. I don't know, Igor WWW, that guy, are really involved in performance. So that would have been another valid place to go for that kind of stuff. But I ended up in GitLab just because I'd been dealing with it so much. It would just seem like a natural transition for me. But it didn't have to be development, I guess.
Maybe that's a good call out too, Will, now that you say that it may be a pattern. For me, moving to it was access at the time, now authentication and authorization. It was sort of a natural change because I did a lot of work and support with LDAP and SAML and a lot of those authentication mechanisms. And Will, same for you, having done a lot in Italy in your current role.
So I mentioned this in Slack because I was like, I know people are noticing this trend from staff, support engineer to moving to development. I was actually invited to apply to be a backend engineer in auth because that is where my expertise is. And, like Drew and Will says, you do so much of it. And if you look at the MRs that I contribute, a lot of them are going to be for auth, that you start to get to know that part of the product and the code really well to the point where you do become like an expert, not just within support, but you become an expert even within the development and product group and within the company. So I do think it's often a natural transition in that sense because of how deep you get into that expertise. But as I said in Slack, I don't have any plans to move at least anytime soon. So I was invited and encouraged to apply, but I I didn't. For those of you who have talked to me enough know that I don't really consider myself a developer. And I will say I code, but I don't really program. And I like troubleshooting more than writing code. So I have no plans to leave support anytime soon. So I'll be sticking around for at least a couple of years, if not longer.
All right. Julie is writing a question as I speak, so I'll wait for her to finish that one and then I'll have her ask that. We're doing good on time. That's our last question. If you have any further questions that you want to add, please feel free to add them to the document. It's both in Slack and on the calendar invite. So feel free to throw anything else in there. And I think it's probably the understanding that if we don't get to everything, that hopefully they'll be filled out async afterwards. But Julie, go ahead and ask your question.
So as someone who's new to the company, my understanding is that nobody knows everything. I mean, you just can't know everything. So as staff engineers, do you do more specializing? Like Will works with Italy a lot from what I've just understood here. Or do you have a more broad experience of all of the things? Like broad knowledge that's like an inch deep, or do you just do more specializing?
Both. I feel like you're kind of T-shaped, right? So you have to be broad in general, but and then you're also specializing at the same time. So like for me, like one of the things I tried to do was get MRs in to resolve kind of pain points that customers had that weren't going to be high priority enough for development to get to them. And so that involves specializing, particularly in GitLab, and then kind of like get set up with an omnibus and so forth. But then, as kind of like as someone who's just a resource for the team, that is very spread apart and very broad. Like the senior help sessions could be anything. Although I feel like on my calls, Andrew ends up answering half the questions I don't know anyway. So thank you, Andrew, for being my backup senior in a way. But yeah, so it's you're both specializing and being called to be very broad at the same time.
I agree. And I like that reference actually to being T-shaped. It's a great visualization, but I think it is true, both broad and specialized. And very, very true that, I mean, support has a tough role with a product like GitLab because it is so expansive, and so true that nobody's going to know everything.
I would just say that I think this is true for senior and staff, that the most important thing is kind of those troubleshooting skills, right? It's that someone comes up with a problem to you and you know where to start, you know where to go. And there are cases where, during the help sessions or pairing sessions, whatever it is, that even I'll be like, I think you need an expert in this topic. Let's find someone for you. And the product's just too big for us to be an expert in everything. I will say for my part that I didn't start wanting to be an expert in auth. It just ended up that way. There's a new feature in SaaS in particular with Skim. And then you work on one ticket, you work on two tickets, you start doing demo videos, and then all of a sudden you're an expert. And then, you're the one asking the hard questions of dev. Thank you, Drew, for always, being willing to help troubleshoot a lot of the Skim issues. You just end up falling into being an expert in certain things, I think. And as a single individual, you only have so much time in your day. So, as much as I'd love to be an expert in more topics, I have expertise in about I'm going to say 3 or 4. And that's enough to like more than take up my day if I were just answering questions in those expertise, let alone everything else.
All right. We are getting close to time here. So I have, I think, one more question. And this one's from me. What advice do you have for engineers who aspire to become staff?
Yeah, so my general advice, which I don't actually think is particularly for staff, is that the thing that I have found most helpful is getting, stronger at kind of like widely applicable troubleshooting techniques. So like strace as an example, right? So like that can be used for any number of problems. And being efficient and understanding that and being able to use that quickly has been like a force multiplier or whatever in terms of like helping me get to the bottom of problems faster, or TCP dump would be another good tool for something like that. And whatever it is you're dealing with, things that can help you understand a problem or many problems are things that I think are worth putting more time into, just because you can use them over and over again. And the faster you get with them, the faster you can get to the root of whatever problem it is. So I think that's something that I have found very helpful in my time in support.
Yeah,
Drew, you unmuted first.
Yeah, just those troubleshooting skills, I think, are so important and serve well in a role like this, because the product is so broad. And since you're never going to know everything, just having kind of that general deep troubleshooting, those skills and understanding those tools that you have at your disposal. And I'm really enjoying this call because it's bringing back a lot of memories. And so I'm remembering now that, yes, Will is the strace guy. Whenever we were working on problems together, remember, well, have we straced it yet? So love remembering those things.
And the JQ whiz. Like,
Everyone knows JQ, right?
And yeah, like JQ is like another one that I think we all recognize Will being like being really good at. And I'm always amazed at how quickly you can like rate JQ, in terminal to bring up summaries of things from logs. So just to add to that, I would say that's true. It's about, a lot of it is actually searching skills, right? Like it's searching logs, it's searching issues, searching the code base, and it's really about becoming an expert in searching for and digging into those things so that you can more efficiently find the root cause. Learning how to read a backtrace, for example, whether that's from logs or whether it's from Sentry, that'll take you really far no matter which level or role you're in. So I definitely think Will and Drew have it right. Specifically for staff, I don't know that there is any one thing. I talked about it before. If there is one thing, is talk to your senior manager or director about what it would look like for you. Every person is different. I think everyone knows that Will and I are quite different in terms of the company need that we're fulfilling, right? Or that we have been. And it is about finding that need that you are fulfilling for staff. And so definitely have that conversation early, and you may not have to have it multiple times, but definitely have that conversation early. The other thing is to look at what path you want to take. I've talked specifically before about why I chose not to be a manager. but almost everyone that I think is a senior, so many of the seniors I could see becoming either staff or manager. They have the skills to do it. And if you want someone to talk to, Ronald in EMEA has specifically talked about why he wants to go the manager track. So potentially talk to him, but definitely don't feel like staff is the only path. It's not. We've talked about as well looking at different roles in other parts of the organization, which, you know, would make us sad and support to see you go. But obviously, we've talked about before, especially in AMER, we had 3 people leave the company at some point, all in 1 week. And so I think it was Lee who talked about how, you know, no matter what role you're in, you know, GitLab is unlikely the last place you're going to be. So it's about finding a way to help you develop in your role and grow and take you to the next thing in your career path.
Right on. Well, I think that is a pretty good point to end on. Staff, if any of you want to fill out the answers asynchronously in the question pool, feel free. But otherwise, we are all set here. We are at time. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording now. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.